Welcome back, guys. I am Follygon, and this is Sculptober Day 14, where I am going to be working on Princess Kida from Disney's Atlantis. If you're new around here, click that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about digital sculpting, check out gumroad.com/Follygon. There you can find all my courses, brushes, materials, and all sorts of other stuff like base meshes. This sculpt took 3 hours to complete, created in ZBrush, as all my sculpts are, and I'm going to be talking about my process here, some of the good things that happened, and some of the bad. Starting off with the initial stages of Blockout, getting in our major landmarks. I was referencing some of the screenshots from the original Atlantis film for the character, obviously, and with that she has this really kind of sharp, narrow face, but she actually has a lot of kind of hard, chiseled features. So she has like a really square chin, a really kind of sharp point for the cheekbone or zygomatic bone that flows back to the ear. A lot of really cool shapes going on in the face, a lot of really sharp shapes going on in the face. I initially created this face a bit more round. I do sharpen it up a little bit more towards the end, narrow it out, get it feeling a bit more on brand for the character, but the style is definitely different from the original film. I wasn't really interested in doing the character in the original style. I was more interested in experimenting with the style of this character, trying to create something a little bit new. So I didn't go for a direct translation like I've done in some of my other Sculptober videos, but I had a lot of fun doing that, a lot of experimentation going on, and we'll talk about that more later on. So landmarks aside, just getting in some of those basic proportions, figuring out some of those major plane changes around the face. Like I mentioned, she has a lot of these really sharp features. I tried to soften those. That was actually one of the hardest parts to figure out about this style that I was aiming for. I took a little bit of inspiration from the Disney princesses in Wreck-It Ralph 2. I really like that style. It's pretty close to mine. I think I've mentioned that in a previous Sculptober video, but just kind of aiming in that direction while trying to figure out that nice balance there with sharp and soft shapes. In past videos for Sculptober, because I'm very limited on time, I have mostly just been creating heads for characters when I've done something like that. I wanted to expand on that a little bit here today, create a little bit more, so I've created just a tiny bit or a small portion of the body, what some might call a bust. For that, I've created a basic rib cage, stomach region, and hips, just from some primitive geometry, keeping the shapes simple, blocking out their position, and then quickly merging them together later. If you guys saw my video on the cave girl that I recently sculpted based off of a Xavier Housen concept, I only created the head and that was chopped off at the neck because there was a lot of complexity going on with the hair and accessories. So there was like a lot of earrings and other stuff going on there that was pretty crazy, and that took a lot of time to complete. Here, because I created a bit more of the body and spent a bit more time in that area, that used up a lot more time, and I had less time to work on things like the hair for this character. Not to say that the hair turned out bad or anything, but it does end up being quite a bit more messy than a lot of the things that I've worked on here for other Sculptober videos. So this one is not going to be quite as clean, and you'll see here soon enough what I'm talking about. Right now, a lot of the forms in the face feel really awkward. They're just kind of placeholders for things that I'll be working on more later. Oftentimes, before you get color in, or before you start refining and getting things in like eyes, I think personally it can feel a bit awkward. I used to really struggle with that when I was new to sculpting, and it really kind of hindered my progress. I got stuck in that area a lot. You know, you feel like you're kind of trudging through the muck and mire and you don't really know how to progress from there. But if you just kind of keep progressing, keep pushing forward, eventually you'll get to a good spot. It just kind of takes some time. I've talked about a lot in the past Sculptober videos about how it's really important for you to just kind of push through those early stages, get as much stuff on your canvas as you possibly can, and then later on you can refine from there. I wasn't a huge fan of the shape of the eyes that I created here. I was actually liking the placement, I was liking the block out. Up to this stage, once I created those eyelids, things kind of started to feel a bit too off character for me. A lot of it was because the shape of the character's eyes in the original film are kind of weird. It's almost like she doesn't have any bottom eyelids. The inner portion where the tear duct is for your eye is just an absolutely like bonkers shape on this character. And then it feels like her eyeball's like about to fall out of her head. Like I said, it kind of looks like she doesn't have any bottom eyelids. So I was struggling to kind of bring this into a new style while also kind of making it feel like the same character. Especially for something that's just supposed to be a daily sketch. Someone needs to come over here and rein me in a little bit each day because I keep biting off way more than I can chew with these. But yes, finding that style here was a struggle, translating that to something new. Like I said, it felt a bit awkward at first. I really struggled to kind of find that make sense. I think for the end character for this sketch today, though, it kind of ends in a good place, so we'll get there eventually. But here's some of that poly paint getting added. One of my personal favorite parts of the process, I feel like it's when things really start to come alive and it starts feeling like more of a character and less like an alien, especially once you get a skin tone on there and start getting in things like the eyelashes and eyebrows. Speaking of which, I use my faithful and trusty cube tube brush for those. It essentially allows you to insert a curve of simple tubed geometry, and then what I typically do after that is I clean it up, I remove some of the polygons to simplify the curve, and occasionally I will do things like bevel and crease edges to make certain aspects of the form translate more softly or more sharp. Typically around areas like eyelashes, I will crease those and get a nice crisp edge. As I've talked about in our last video where we focused a little bit more on expression, which I really enjoyed that day, the eyes and mouth hold a ton of expressive ability, right? The eyes and mouth are the most expressive part of your character's face. Ton of expression comes from there. And I really think that's why people struggle with eyes and mouths so much. Same thing with hands. Hands are extremely expressive, and I think because of that, they're very difficult. It's very hard to make them look good. So I spend quite a bit more time working on things like the eyes. I definitely come back to them more than once. The initial pass on here is something that is just something that's done quick, kind of hit it back every once in a while, jump around as often as I can, come back to the eyes whenever I'm noticing more things that I think I can improve upon. Typically, it's very small things, like for instance, the shape of the eyelash right now is not really giving me the desired effect, so I return to that later and sharpen up the outside corner to give it more of a cat eye, or kind of like a cat eye makeup effect. Next up, we're going off to the hair to begin creating some of that. For that, I use, once again, the cube tube brush, and for this, I decided to keep some of that kind of hard shape language that was found in the original character from the film. That was probably one of the things that I decided to keep with this character. I changed a lot of the shapes going on there, but for the most part, I kept the shape language very similar. I also put the back of her hair into a bun because I thought that that would be a little bit less work than doing some longer hair yet again, and it gives us, a little bit of a different hairstyle to experiment with here during Sculptober so that you guys can see a little bit more variation. One thing that I wanted to focus on just a little bit here is this idea of preconceived form that I think a lot of people really struggle with when they are sculpting. Really anything. They get kind of this anatomical form stuck in their head, and I think it really kind of pigeonholes people. So for instance here with the chest, I create a more simplified combination of form to kind of simplify the structure there. Obviously she doesn't have, two breasts here. It's just kind of one larger shape that I create a larger plane change of and begin working on more to refine that and get something that feels a bit more natural. What I'm talking about when I say preconceived form is that people often have these ideas in their head of what things look like, and they think they have a good idea, and because of that, they often forego their ability to observe and use that in something like a reference to better understand that shape. So here, I've created a very simple, almost blockout of the larger form of the chest to begin working that into creating the clothing and getting that all to blend well together. Then it's back up to the eye. There is that more pointed eyelash that I was talking about earlier. And I also have more of the hair done at this point. I've skipped over some of the more boring aspects that are kind of repeats of a lot of the stuff that we've done here in the past. So you guys have seen a lot of this already. But if you are interested in seeing more stuff on hair or fur, I'll put some links down in the description for you guys to check out some of the previous Sculptober videos where I've done a lot more focus on that. And in a future one, I think I'm going to focus maybe the entire length of the video just on hair. I think that would be pretty fun, and I know a lot of you are interested in hair. Next up, just doing some simple poly paint on the eyes. I typically keep the spheres for the eyes low poly because if you subdivide them, they get kind of out of hand in terms of poly count pretty quick. I think if you just subdivide maybe 3-ish times, maybe 4, they kind of explode past 1 or 4 million, so they get pretty crazy pretty quick. So just keeping them low poly for now, and I use dynamic subdivs to kind of preview what that would look like if they were subdivided. So for the most part, I have, all the stuff in there for the character. So I've been talking about how it's really important to get all the parts and pieces in there for a sculpt, right? to get it to start feeling like the character, you need all the stuff in there. But after you get to that point, you can still not feel like the character. So for instance here, I think that there are a lot of things in the face that makes it feel too rounded, maybe even too young. Originally it was feeling too old. I had a bit more form around the mouth. It was feeling a bit fatty there, and it kind of made her feel like almost like an old hag or something. So I had to clean that up, get her feeling a bit young. Now her face has this roundness that kind of pulls away from the Kida character too much, in my opinion. So I try to get some of that back in here at the end. And to do that, I begin pinching up some planes of the face to begin just better understanding some of those, figure out where I can make some changes, do a few things to the proportions of the face, like decreasing some of the shape in the chin to get that feeling a bit sharper, pull in around the back portion of the jaw to kind of get the face a bit more skinny. So sometimes it's really important to take a step backwards, reassess, kind of go back through, make sure that your planes are reading really well, and then after you're done with that, you can go through with a smooth pass and begin to soften things back up. Obviously, you don't want all those hard plane changes unless that is specifically the style that you're going for. So lots of stuff that we just went through really fast, but you know, we're on day 14 here of Sculptober, so that marks 2 weeks. It's kind of flying by pretty quick. We're not even technically halfway yet, so we got quite a bit more to go. And with each new Sculptober video, we'll be focusing on different aspects of character creation, fundamentals, sculpting things like hair, eyes, mouths, etc. So if you're new around here, click that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about digital sculpting, check out gumroad.com/Follygon for all of my courses, brushes, and materials. That's gonna be all for this one, guys, and I will see you in the next video with the prompt poof.